For 400 years, the steel still cuts, as if it left the forge yesterday. The roads still run arrow straight where every other road in the known world has crumbled into mud. And in a sealed room in Old Town, a candle of black glass burns without melting, fed by something no one alive can name. The empire that made all of this is dead. The doom didn't just drown a continent, it buried the user manual. 400 years of maesters, sorcerers, smiths and kings have tried to copy what the Freehold did at its peak. None have come close. Not the Targaryens, not the Free Cities, not Yi, not the Citadel itself. And the strangest part, the part the maesters quietly refused to put in the official record, some of it is still working. These are the 15 things Old Valyria had that no kingdom has matched since. Some are stone, some are steel, some are flesh. And the last one on this list, the one nothing on earth has come close to since the doom, is still flying. I'm your maester at the Black Dread. The bones remember. 1. Valyrian steel. Start with the obvious one. Valyrian steel is lighter than castle forged, harder than anything in the known world, and never loses its edge. Swords hundreds of years old are still as sharp as the morning they cooled, folded thousands of times, forged with dragonfire, and imbued with spells the maesters can only describe by what they cannot do. The Citadel knows this better than they admit. They give a Valyrian steel link only to a maester who studies the higher mysteries, magic, sorcery, the things the Order officially says don't exist. About 1 in 100 maesters wears one. Topo Mott of King's Landing can reforge it. Qohor can reforge it. Neither can make a single new blade. Every Valyrian steel sword in existence is finite and shrinking because the recipe died at Valyria. What we have are heirlooms from a dead empire that the living world cannot reproduce. 2. The dragonroads. Tyrion Lannister rides one out of Pentos. He calls it a ribbon of fused stone, raised half a foot above the ground so rainfall runs off the shoulders, wide enough for 3 wagons abreast, arrow straight to the horizon. 400 years after the doom, these roads still don't crack. The Dragonlords use dragonfire to vitrify the stone, to liquefy it into a single seamless surface and let it cool that way. The only roads anywhere in the world that compare are the ones laid by the eunuch emperors of Yi, half a continent away. Westeros has nothing close. Westeros has muddy tracks that turn to soup every spring. The Freehold ran an entire continent on these. Relays, couriers, imperial speed, and 400 years of weather, war, and abandonment have not been enough to mar them. 3. Dragonstone. Not the castle, not the island, the material itself. The Valyrians worked a black stone harder than steel and harder than diamond, fused with the same sorcery that built the roads. The castle on Dragonstone was carved from it. The Black Walls of Volantis are built from it. The piers under the Long Bridge are built from it. The dragonroads themselves are laid from it. And according to the texts, the stone still hums. The faint echo of the magic used to forge it never quite goes silent. The doom shattered the peninsula. It did not shatter the stone. 4. The topless towers of Valyria. The towers of the capital were so tall, the maesters who later glimpsed their ruins gave up trying to name a height. Topless, that is the word the records use. Rising out of a peninsula lit at night by the glow of the 14 flames. Nothing in Westeros today comes close. Not even the High Tower of Old Town. And the High Tower itself sits on a foundation laid by Valyrian sorcery. What stood at the heart of the Freehold dwarfed anything King's Landing has ever raised. And whatever those towers were used for, observatories, sorcerers' eyries, dragon keeps, the books do not say. The smoking sea covered the answer. 5. The Black Walls of Volantis. 200 feet tall, wide enough at the top for 6 4-horse chariots to race abreast. Volantis was a Valyrian garrison for 100 years before it was a city. The Black Walls came first. The city grew up around them, and inside those walls lived the old blood, the few Volantanes who can still claim descent from the Dragonlords. They guard the walls as inheritance. The walls themselves need no guarding. Nothing in the known world has the means to break them. You can siege Volantis for 100 years. You will not crack a single fused stone block. 6. the Long Bridge of Volantis. 40 years to build, spanning the mouth of the Rhoyne, held up by piers, driven into currents so treacherous that men still die crossing them by boat. Lomas Longstrider named it one of the 9 wonders made by man. Its eastern gateway is an arch of black stone carved with sphinxes, manticores, dragons, and beasts no Meister can put a name to. Beyond the arch, the dragonstone roadway stretches across the river, barely wide enough for 2 wagons abreast, lined on both sides by entire markets, shops, and homes built into the bridge itself. And in the center of that span, today, the hands of thieves still hang from iron stanchions. The bridge wasn't built to last a few centuries. It was built without an end date, at the height of Valyrian glory, and 40 years was nothing to them. Volantis is the eldest daughter of the Freehold. The Long Bridge is the cord that never broke. 7. The Valyrian Sphinxes. They don't only sit at the Long Bridge, they sit at the gates of the Citadel. Green marble, onyx-eyed, lion-bodied, with the wings of eagles and the tails of serpents. They flank the small council chamber inside the Red Keep, with garnet eyes burning in black marble faces. And out in the velvet hills of Essos, half buried beside an old road, there is a sphinx with a human face and the body of a dragon, crouched, waiting, watching whoever passes. The Valyrians put them at gates, at thresholds, at doors of power. Sphinxes speak in riddles. So did the dragon lords. You can copy the carving. You cannot copy what it was guarding. 8. Dragonbinder, the Hellhorn. Euron Greyjoy claims he found it in the Smoking Sea. 6 feet long, black gleam, banded in red gold and dark Valyrian steel. Glyphs cut into the bands that glow red hot, then white hot when the horn is sounded. The man who blows it bleeds from the eyes, the ears, the nose, and dies with his lungs charred black inside his chest. The inscription, read aloud by the Red Priest Mokoro, "I am Dragonbinder. No mortal man shall sound me and live." The dragon lords of the Freehold used horns like this to bind dragons to their will. The recipe, like Valyrian steel, like the candles, like the stone, died with them. Dragonbinder is the only working dragon leash on the map, and the makers are dust. 9. Glass candles. A 3-foot candle of polished obsidian, twisted, ridged, sharp as a sword. 4 of them are sealed in a vault inside the Citadel. Every acolyte the night before he takes his vows stands a vigil over one, in total darkness, trying to light it. The acolytes are told the candles cannot burn, that the vigil is a lesson in humility. It is not a lesson in humility, because in Archmeister Marwyn's chamber on the Isle of Ravens, one is burning. And in Korth, in the house of Arathon Nightwalker, candles that have not lit in 100 years are alight again. The sorcerers of the Freehold use these candles to see across mountains, seas, and deserts, to enter a man's dreams, to speak to one another while seated half a world apart. No ravens, no riders, no delay. Every hand, every spymaster, every magister in the world would pay any price to make one work for them. They are working again, and the world has not yet asked who is on the other end. 10. The 14 Flames as industry. Every other civilization has volcanoes. The Valyrians had 14 of them in a chain, and they harnessed every single one. Mines ran beneath the flames into the heart of the peninsula. Forges drew heat directly from the vents. Hatcheries used the same heat to incubate dragon eggs. The flames lit the nights of the Freehold like a city of fire seen from 1,000 miles out. No one else in the known world ran a continent on geothermal power. No one else turned a chain of active volcanoes into the industrial spine of an empire. And in a single day in the year 102 BC, the same flames that built the empire ended it. 11. The Pyraethra pantheon. Fanfill Canon names 4 Valyrian gods: Balerion, Vagar, Meraxes, Syrax, and gives no domains, no temples, no myths. In our reading of the religion, the Freehold worshipped 14 gods: Balerion the father, Thraxia the mother, and 12 children, each one consecrated to one of the 14 flames. Each god had a flame Each flame had a vent. Each vent had a temple. Each temple had a function. Vhagar's altars trained warriors and drilled formations. Merax's priesthoods kept the sea charts and blessed the harbors. Tharion's seers maintained dream records and read prophecy. Aelira's couriers wrote airlane law. The religion of the Freehold wasn't symbolic, it was operational. It was the civil service of the empire, with the gods as the departments and the volcanoes as their offices. You can build a sept. You can raise a temple to the drowned god or the Lord of Light. You cannot build a god into a volcano. 12. The dragon-keeping caste. The Freehold did not let just anyone near a dragon. Bonding a dragon to a rider was the top of a ladder that took centuries to design. Egg wardens tended the nesting sites and recorded which vents held which clutches. Hatchery acolytes documented feeding patterns, mating seasons, and territorial ranges. Flame marshals walked the lava ledges where adult dragons roosted, breathing air that should have killed them. Sky learners attempted limited flight, and only after years of climbing that ladder did a candidate face the bonding trial itself. The Targaryens carried fragments of this system to Dragonstone before the doom. Eggs placed in cradles with newborns. The phrase blood of the dragon. The claim trials. But the deeper apparatus, the caste, the records, the breeding charts, the rites, stayed in Valyria and died with it. You can put an egg in a crib. You cannot rebuild the institution that put it there. 13. The specialized dragon breeds. The Freehold didn't simply have dragons, it had categories of dragons. Obsidian colossi, bred for siege. Ember maws, bred for forge work and street-level smoke warfare. Sky shriekers, bred for high-altitude reconnaissance and signal relay. Wave runners, bred for sea lane patrol and harbor defense. Stormclaws, bred to fly into storms. Sunscales, bred for desert flight where every other dragon would die. Each of the 40 families bred for a function. Each function had a tactical doctrine. Each doctrine had a manual. After the doom, the Targaryens kept dragons and bred them, but they had no breed charts left. Balerion the Black Dread reads in our framework as a Colossus-class beast. Vhagar reads as something heavier still. Drogon, in our reading, is a fragment of a lineage whose paperwork drowned with the peninsula. What Aegon brought to Westeros was 3 dragons. What the Freehold ran at the height of its power was a sky full of them. 14. Valyrian sorcery. Blood and fire. Canon is clear on the foundation. Every working spell the Valyrians cast was rooted in either blood or fire. Spells fused stone. Spells forged steel. Spells lit candles. Spells bound dragons. Spells, for thousands of years, kept the 14 flames in check until they didn't. The doom is the only evidence the world has that the sorcerers eventually failed. But up to that final morning, the magisters of the Freehold were doing things no order of maesters has been able to repeat. They saw across the world. They survived volcanic vents. They sealed oaths into a person's soul. The Citadel's official position is that magic does not exist. The Citadel keeps 4 glass candles in a sealed vault. 15. The dragons and what bound them. The last item is the hardest to accept. The Freehold had dragons, not 3, not 5. By the old accounts, and we are careful here because Canon does not give a number, the Dragon Lords had so many dragons that the air over the peninsula required law. 40 families, 40 bonded bloodlines, each with their own clutches, their own rights, their own air lanes. And every one of those bonds, in our reading, was a contract enforced by a god whose name has been quietly removed from the religious record. You can hatch an egg in a pyre. Daenerys proved that. You can ride a dragon if you have the blood. The Targaryens proved that. What you cannot do, what no living person on the face of the earth has done, is rebuild the system that kept disciplined formations of dragons under the rule of 40 noble houses for thousands of years. That isn't a steel recipe. That isn't a building. That is a civilization. So you might think the lesson of this list is simple. Valyria was just further ahead. Better steel, taller towers, smarter sorcerers, more dragons. A head start the rest of the world is slowly catching up to. That isn't what the list says. The list says the Freehold built things the world cannot rebuild. Steel no smith can repeat, roads no mason can lay, walls no army can crack, candles no maester can light, sphinxes whose riddles nobody can answer, gods whose names have been quietly removed from the record, dragons no rider can bond by the old rites. The dragon lords didn't just have a head start, they had access to something, to a way of pulling fire and stone and blood together that died with their last bloodline. The Targaryens are the only Valyrian house that survived the doom, and even they could not reproduce most of this. They left Valyria with eggs in cradles, blood in their veins, and a head full of memorized phrases. 3 dragons came out the other side. That is what survived. That is what an apocalypse looks like. Because the candles are burning again, the steel still cuts, the roads still run, and somewhere out in the smoking sea, beneath water no captain will sail, the topless towers still stand, waiting for someone to remember the recipe. I'm your maester at the Black Dread. The bones remember.